This episode of Literary Treks is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and to help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading, in case I got bored.
Welcome, everyone, to Literary Treks. We are your official Star Trek books and comics podcast here on the Trek FM network, and it is your destiny to be listening to us right now. It's your singular destiny. I'm Bruce Gibson. Thank you for joining us, and with me, as he always is Dan Gunther.
Yay! Hi, Bruce. Happy to be here. You know what? It's 2020. How crazy is that?
It is, isn't it? It's freaking weird. 2020. Gosh, I'm old.
We're all old. What was it somebody said? 1990 is now the same distance away from us as 2050 is?
Oh.
Right?
Ooh, don't say that. That's freaking me out right now. That's really freaking me out.
Yep.
2050. Gosh, add 30 to your age.
Oh.
No, I don't want to think about it. Hi, I'm Betty White. No, I'm not quite that old, even 30 years from now. But anyway. Oh, man, oh, yeah. Hey, but you know what? It's a blessing every year that we get, that we're alive.
Definitely.
So,
absolutely.
Go. And you know what? Each year we get closer to the time of Star Trek.
That's true. I'm worried that we might actually be in the mirror universe, though, but I'm still holding out hope that maybe we're not.
Ooh, well, we have a little bit of mirror universe news coming up here soon. But our feature today is the novel A Singular Destiny by Keith R.A. DeCandido. This book came out 11 years ago, and he's going to be here on the show to talk about it. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do that, in our news, we have 4 things that we want to cover. Speaking of cover, we got a cover. We got the cover of the novel Picard, The Last Best Hope. And this is by Una McCormack, coming out in February 11th. And, it's Jean-Luc Picard wearing some jacket of something and holding out a badge.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I love this cover. Like, there's the moody lighting, the expression on Picard's face, holding the comm badge up. We see the kind of the backside of the comm badge. I really like this cover. It's simple, but I think it's effective.
I like it too. And you know what? I was just thinking as you're saying that this is the first Star Trek novel, original Star Trek novel that we're getting with a new image of Patrick Stewart on it.
That's true. Yep. It's been a long time.
It is. How weird is that? So yeah, really exciting. And of course, we'll probably have Una on the show when we review that novel. But yeah, there's the cover. And I think you have a little bit of the brief summary or synopsis for it.
Yeah, there is a back cover blurb, and it says, a thrilling novel leading into the new CBS series, Una McCormack's The Last Best Hope introduces you to brand new characters featured in the life of beloved Star Trek Captain Jean-Luc Picard, widely considered to be one of the most popular and recognizable characters in all of science fiction. So wow, talk about telling us nothing about what this book is about.
It doesn't matter. It's about Picard, right? We don't
exactly.
care.
Yeah, they are keeping under wraps exactly what's going on. But it sounds like we're going to get maybe some backstory or something to do with some of the new characters in the show, maybe. That's a guess from that.
If they're not going to say much of anything about it, it's because they're probably trying to protect it. It's some spoilers to the series. So that makes me even a little more excited.
Definitely, yeah. I'm really looking forward to this one. Not least because Una McCormack's one of my absolute favorite Star Trek authors. And I know I say that about just about every Star Trek author, but I love her books. She can write a good character piece. So I'm looking forward to this big time.
Me too. Well, that's not the only thing. So something else is coming out in March. It's Star Trek Picard Official Collector's Edition hardcover. It's a special edition by Titan Books coming out March 24th. And by the way, when we say these dates, they are subject to change. This is a deluxe collector's edition offering a behind-the-scenes guide to the brand new Star Trek TV show following the adventures of Patrick Stewart's fan favorite Star Trek character, Jean-Luc Picard. I'm surprised. I thought Patrick Stewart's fan favorite Star Trek character was William Riker. Oh, wait, they're not saying it's Patrick Stewart's favorite. I thought they were saying it was his favorite character. Because, I think his favorite character is Will Riker. But I was kind of surprised and happy about this because I wasn't expecting to get a behind the scenes book so quickly after the series premieres.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's by Titan Books, and what they tend to do is it seems they kind of bundle articles about the show, behind the scenes articles from the magazines together in a book format, and this is probably what they're doing here, but they're always worth picking up and having in your library as kind of a neat little snapshot of this period in time when we've got this new Star Trek series on the way. I love behind the scenes stuff, so this is always a lot of fun to kind of leaf through and pick little details out of.
Yeah, and the cover even says it has 100 pages to it, so it's pretty hefty. And hey, it's Picard wearing that same outfit he's wearing in the novel.
Yeah, so in the novel, he's looking right at the camera, right? And this one, he's looking kind of just to his right of the camera, as if to say, "What, you want to take another photo? I already took a perfect one for the book. What's the matter with you?" That's the look I'm getting from his face here anyway.
It's the look you're getting from mine now, too. Anyway, so yeah, that's exciting. Hey, but you know what? March has something else coming out, and it is a new novel by Chrisopher L. Bennett. It's a TOS novel, The Higher Frontier, and we got a cover for that, and it's beautiful. It's blue, which is my favorite color. Well, the images are blue, but it looks like it's some kind of rocket going across a planetoid, and there's like a planet with rings in the background. I want that as a poster.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Now, if you look closely at that ship, it's an Andorian ship, like the style from Enterprise. If you look really, get like kind of a top-down view on it. And this is really frustrating to me because there's a second ship, I think. But it's kind of like behind the A in the Star Trek.
Oh. Yeah, because you see the
front of it. I don't know if it's another Andorian ship or if it's a different kind of ship.
I can't.
It's frustrating because I want to see it, but it's behind that darn A.
I'm not sure if it is or not. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, doesn't this take place after the motion picture?
Yes, it's set during the motion picture kind of post TMP time period there.
That excites me.
Yeah, because Christopher Bennett has a lot of experience writing in that era, and that's kind of one of his niches that he likes to explore a bit. So definitely excited to revisit that period as well. I love what they've done with this cover. They've completely kind of redesigned the look, and now Star Trek is kind of going up the side of the cover instead of the top. Man, I think this is going to be really eye-catching on the shelf. I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely, yeah. And don't you have a blurb for this one?
I do have a blurb for this. So it says, an all-new Star Trek movie-era adventure featuring James T. Kirk. Investigating the massacre of a telepathic minority, Captain James T. Kirk and the crew of the USS Enterprise confront a terrifying new threat. Faceless armored hunters whose extra-dimensional technology makes them seemingly unstoppable. Kirk must team with the powerful telepath Miranda Jones and the enigmatic Medusans to take on these merciless killers in an epic battle that will reveal the true faces of both enemy and ally. Dun, dun,
yes. Dun. Bring it on.
Yeah, so bringing some elements from TOS, Miranda Jones, and the Medusans from the episode Is There in Truth No Beauty? So that's kind of cool. I like when they tie back to things that happened during the series and stuff.
Me too. I definitely am like totally stoked for this one because we don't have enough in that time frame, and I always want more in that time frame too. So, Hey, you know, we're still focusing on March. There's something else from IDW coming out. It's called Star Trek Hell's Mirror, and this looks really cool because it's in the Mirror Universe. I told you in the early part of the show that there was something Mirror Universe coming up, but it's the Mirror Universe and Khan. In the Mirror Universe. Now, how exciting is that?
It's really cool. I mean, we've gotten Khan in the Prime Universe. We've gotten Khan in the Kelvin timeline. Now we need Khan in the Mirror Universe. And then maybe we'll get Khan in the Kelvin's Mirror timeline. And, oh man, you can't get enough Khan. So yeah, this is really cool.
Do you think Khan in the Mirror Universe is kind of a wimp?
I'm hoping he's just like a really nice guy. You know?
Now, it says legendary writer J.M. DeMatteis returns to Star Trek for the first time in nearly 40 years. And I looked it up, and the last thing he wrote was Star Trek number 18 in the comic series back in 1981.
Wow.
It was the Marvel line. It was the last issue of the Marvel line back then. And that would have been the motion picture era.
Wow.
Right before The Wrath of Khan came out.
That's incredible.
So this is his first one. Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? I can't tell. I think this might be a one-issue thing. I don't think it's a series. I haven't been able to verify that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell with the information they've given us. So, yeah, I'm not sure either. But either way, man, this is going to be interesting. Something totally new. Every time IDW comes up with something, I'm just like, where did this come from? You know, like the Q conflict and the Voyager Mirror crew, and now Khan in the Mirror Universe. I didn't know I needed that story, but I do.
Oh, yes, you do. You definitely need that story. So it's going to be exciting. So that's March 25th, this first issue or only issue. I'm not sure exactly, but that is coming out the end of March. And we're looking at the cover, and it has, you know, Khan very prominent on the cover from Space Seed. And then we've got a smaller Kirk and Spock from the Mirror Universe in there. So pretty cool. That being said, I think it's time for listener feedback. So from our past shows. So let's look at feedback that we got for episode number 291. And this is the episode where we talked about Body by Starfleet, where we had Rob Perlman on. By the way, before I even get into this, this is a perfect time to read comments about exercising because we're into a new year. Mm-hmm. And I was telling Dan that I've gained the weight back that I had 10 years ago. So it's time to lose it. I'm now on a diet. So I need to exercise too. So anyway, the first comment we have is from Clayton Huston. He says, taking two of my favorite things and mashing them together. So I guess that means Star Trek and exercise. Well,
see, for me, that's chocolate and peanut butter, but hey, you do you.
Oh my gosh, same. Oh my gosh, same. Yeah. Star Trek's a favorite. Exercise is not for me. So I'm going to try to make exercise my favorite now.
I like it. Well, Justin Ozer says, I've been exercising through walking for the last year and a half, and I've averaged 4.7 miles a day this year. The 47 reference is completely accidental. Is it, though? Is it? Anyway, that means there are times when I'm watching Star Trek while walking back and forth in my living room to get in my steps. It's an interesting experience doing this because I'm a bit closer to the TV and I get to see scenes from several different perspectives as I walk around the room.
This is great, Justin. I love this.
Body by Starfleet sounds fantastic, and I really enjoyed the interview. I was convinced to buy the book partway through the interview as it sounds like a lot of fun, and I know there's more I can do in my exercise besides walking. It should be arriving to me tomorrow. Thanks. And then we got a follow-up that the book then arrived. So that's awesome. Now, Justin, regarding you walking around the room and seeing Star Trek from different perspectives, just imagine what that will be like when eventually we're watching Star Trek on the holodeck and you can see it from like different three-dimensional perspectives on the sets. That would be cool.
I like that. Hey, you know what? That would really help my exercising if I went to a holodeck, played Star Trek, and Klingons start chasing me around. And that's how I get my exercise, because Klingons are chasing me, and I'm just running through the decks of this Enterprise or something like that.
Perfect. Or you could totally just take on a character in a famous episode. So for some reason, you saying that just reminded me of like Beale and Lokai from Let That Be Your Last Battlefield running, chasing each other through the Enterprise.
And I would run just like that.
Exactly.
The way they run is so funny because it just doesn't even look natural. But I think because the director probably told them, don't run too fast because you'll be in and out of frame in like a second. So you've got to kind of slow it down and just, it's hilarious. Kimberly Lawler says, this was a fun interview to listen to. Thanks. That was her saying thanks, not me. I really don't love to exercise, but exercise plus Star Trek could be a way to make it a bit more palatable. The naming of exercise moves in this book had me laughing quite a lot. And yeah, you know what? I'm going to challenge everyone. This is our New Year's resolution to all those who are looking to be healthier. I want you to come up with a new exercise or an existing exercise, whatever, and then give it a Star Trek name and let us know what it is.
Definitely. I want to hear those. That would be great.
All right. So that's all the comments we have there. But you know what? We're going to give you a bonus because it's the new year. We're going to do our listener feedback for episode 292, where it was about Dead Endless, the Star Trek Discovery novel. And we had Dave Gallender on that one. Okay. So one of the comments we got from Andrea Boot says, read it in a day. Loved it. Whoa, yes. Hey, you know what? You can tell somebody loves a book if they read it in a day. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I was a little disappointed in that myself. Like if I'm really into a book and I read it really, really fast, then I'm like, oh, darn, it's done. And it, you know, it was such a good book, but I didn't get to stay with it for days. I read it all at once, but I've definitely done that.
I remember the first time I read a Doctor Who novel was on a plane from Atlanta to Seattle, and I read it all on the plane in that trip.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow. That was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, Janessa Ciarda says, I really wasn't expecting a giant multi-dimensional tardigrade for a psychopomp. It was trippy, and the book overall was trippy. Definitely agree with that. I particularly loved the focus on the bridge crew and giving Bryce and Reese first names. Landry was as unpleasant as her Prime counterpart was, but it was fantastic some background is given on it. Also, as someone who used to read a lot of LGBT romance and erotica, I thought the romantic feelings between Prime Culber and Alt Stamets were handled really well, even if it was only for 4 hours in book time. Thank you. Thanks for that comment. Absolutely. I think Reese was given a name in the show at some point. I don't know if it was ever said, but it might have been in a script or something like that too. So, but yeah, I love that we got that focus on some of those characters that we didn't before.
And Justin Ozer says, great interview, and I absolutely loved this novel. The surprise in the setup is something I suspected a bit early on, but wasn't sure of it until the Landry reference. I love these kind of stories and the possibilities they open up. From the fantastic character work for Stamets and Colbert to building out the main characters in new and delightful ways, to seeing more of the bridge crew, to fleshing out what we know of the mycelial network, to the great new alien species. This novel was delightful from beginning to end. Dave Gallagher gave such amazing insights in this interview. This was my first Dave Gallagher full-length Trek novel. I've previously read an SCE novella he co-authored, and this one already makes him one of my favorite Trek authors. I give the novel 10 out of 10 cute tardigrades who speak in riddles. Hey, yeah, Justin, because we usually don't do our review scores when we have an author on, but I did give it a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. So I'm with you on that.
I did actually on my website, treklit.com, I always do a wrap up of the year in Treklit, and I award a book for being the best Star Trek novel of the year. This year was really tough, but I did end up giving it to Dead Endless. So I was a huge fan of that novel.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
And finally, Reese Morgan says, I've just started reading it, only a few chapters, but very good so far. I haven't actually listened to this episode yet, but could someone tell me, when is this novel supposed to be set? As Tilly is an ensign but hasn't started the command training program, it must be in season 2, right? Although the Red Angel stuff took complete priority, so I don't really see where they would have time for this story. Maybe if I keep reading, it will be made clear, but I'm finding it a distracting frustration. If anyone can clear this up, that would be super. Well, I'm sure you've read by now, and you know where the story is going, but it is a bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to outright say exactly when the book is set, but suffice it to say, you will find out, and it will be an interesting surprise.
All right, well, that's all the comments that we have, and that was for 2 different episodes, so that was awesome. Keep those coming, and you'll see this show posted in the Babel Conference if you want to make any comments about what you're going to hear on this feature with Keith R.A. DeCandido. So stick around for that, and I'd say, why wait? Let's just go ahead and do the feature now.
Yeah, all right, let's do it.
Okay. So back in November, we did 3 episodes focusing on the Destiny trilogy. We did book 1, book 2, book 3. So what follows Destiny? Well, how about a singular Destiny? And that was a novel that came out in 2009, and it was written by Keith R.A. DeCandido. And Keith is in the house. How you doing, Keith?
Hello.
Hey, Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, so I want to start things off right away with, obviously you read the Destiny trilogy when it came out. So
I read it before it came out, actually, but yes.
Before it came out. So how
I had
did
to write the book I wrote.
Exactly.
Actually,
so how did that happen?
I knew what was happening with the Destiny trilogy anyway, because David Mack happens to be one of my closest friends. Dave and I are best buddies. We were in each other's wedding parties. I spent New Year's Eve with him and his wife and several of our closest friends just a couple days ago as we record this. So, Dave and I talk a lot. So I was fully aware of what was going to be happening in the Destiny trilogy from its earliest stages. Just because Dave and I talk. And in particular, Dave wanted to use President Nan Bacco in the Destiny trilogy. So he talked to me about it and wanted me to read over the bits with the president in it, to make sure that I got her voice and her character right. I'm very pleased to say that I had very few notes on what he wrote. He absolutely nailed that character perfectly, and which I was very pleased to see. As I think I said when I was on here talking with you guys about Articles of the Federation, I never expected Bacco to appear again after Articles. I figured she'd be mentioned once or twice as an Easter egg, but that was it. And she became a rather important supporting character, and a lot of it is because Dave used her in the Destiny trilogy. And I'm always been grateful to him for that. But so I was kind of in on, and then Marco Palmieri and Margaret Clark were both, working on, they edited the Destiny trilogy together. At the time, they were the 2 editors and responsible for Trek fiction, and they were both then working on what was going to happen afterward. And there were individual books that were going to deal with the individual crews, which all came out after A Singular Destiny. There was William Leisner's Losing the Peace, which was going to deal with the Next Generation crew. I'm blanking on what the next Titan book was, but there was going to be another Titan book that was going to deal with how the aftermath from Titan's perspective. I think that was one of Christopher Bennett's books.
I think that was over at Torrent C, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, over at Torrent C. Thank you. And Kirsten Beyer was going to be dealing with both the prelude and the prelude during and after Destiny from Voyager's perspective and with Full Circle. And then there was but what my job was to do was to look at the big picture. We just had 7,000 Borg cubes invade and blow the crap out of basically everything. What happens next? And in particular, Marco wanted to set up the Typhon Pact, which then became the focus of a lot of the post-Destiny fiction following Singular Destiny. Part of my job was to set up the Typhon Pact as this basically an adversary to the Federation and the Klingons moving forward in the wake of the Borg invasion. So that was my job, was to sort of do the big picture macro consequences of the Destiny trilogy. And then the other books would look at the more micro consequences to the individual crews that had their own ongoing storylines in Titan and Voyager and Next Generation. And eventually once the Typhon books started, they caught Deep Space Nine up as well. Plus we had the Aventine crew to play with as well. So that was my job. That was the task that Marco set before me, which was to basically to do the big picture consequences. So that was the genesis of the book.
So there you are. You're saying, okay, how do I follow Destiny? This 3-novel epic thing. I mean, I would think you would be thinking about different ideas. Like, should I go light? Should I go dark? Should I be heavy? What was your thought process at this point?
Well, see, the thing is, this was right in my wheelhouse. I am much more interested in the aftermath of conflict than the conflict itself. I kind of already done this, ironically, with another David Mack story in the Starfleet Corps of Engineers series. We did Dave wrote a 2-part story called Wildfire, in which we killed like half the crew, including one of the main characters, and I was not interested so much in that story as I was what happens next. I'm much more interested in family than I am the best of both worlds, if you know what I mean. From a writing perspective, I mean, from a viewer's perspective, I like all of it. But when it comes to what I want to work on, the aftermath of a conflict is of much more interest to me than the conflict itself as a writer. What happens after the war? What happens? What's the recovery process like? So this is exactly, basically starting the work of cleaning up the mess Dave made was pretty much what I wanted to write anyway. That was of much more interest to me than what he did. So I jumped into this with both feet. I like to know what the consequences are. That's, stories, everybody's favorite stories notwithstanding, people don't just live happily ever after. There's more stuff that happens afterward. The question I like to ask as a writer is, and then what happened? So this was exactly the sort of book I wanted to write. And I tried to go both light and dark, because I always do. There's a limit as to how dark I'm ever going to get. It's just not in my nature. But but having said that, there's some dark crap in my favorite parts to write in that book were the interstitial bits between the chapters, where I just looked at different ends of the universe and different aspects and different responses to the Borg invasion. And some of that got really dark. I didn't want it to be completely depressing, because it's Star Trek, and Star Trek is all about being a hopeful future, even in the face of horrific tragedy. And part of it is the idea is we're rebuilding towards something and trying to put everything back together. But I didn't want to downplay the tragedy either. So
I'm glad you brought those up, the kind of interludes in between. I really loved those parts of the book, and I had a real sense of, I think the first time I had read this novel, I hadn't read World War Z, but reading it now after having read World War Z, I kind of get that same feeling that it's like this assemblage of documents and interviews and that sort of thing that really paints the picture of the wider Federation and the wider part of the galaxy at large, which really opens up that world. I thought that was really brilliant.
One of my favorite things that I read when I read Watchmen, when I was in college, I think, when I read Watchmen, and the bits at the end of each issue. It started with the excerpts from Night Owl's, the original Night Owl's autobiography, Under the Hood, and then each issue had something else, magazine articles and interviews and scientific papers and all sorts of other weird stuff. And I love that. It adds so much wonderful texture to the universe. And that's what I was going for there. There's always larger consequences and there's always smaller consequences. And in particular, I wanted to show how this was affecting people all over the place, good and bad. That was trying to get a sense, because it's really easy in any, ongoing dramatic thing. You get very insular because you're focused on your main characters. You're doing Next Generation stories, so you're focused on Picard and the Enterprise and that crew. You're doing a Titan story and you're focused on that ship. Discovery's focused on that ship. Deep Space Nine is focused on that station. It's all the same group of people that you're focusing on because they're your main characters and you're supposed to. And I really wanted to expand out that focus to everybody else. Because this was a major event. What effect is this going to have on some dude on Deneva, on, person serving on as transporter chief on random ship? What does that mean for all these different people? How does it affect the economies or the socioeconomic structure of all these worlds that have been devastated, or all these worlds that are taking in refugees from the worlds that have been devastated? Suddenly, Capella needs to produce a lot more top line because they leave in a lot more of it now. Stuff like that. Those sorts of real world consequences and what it means for the average everyday person.
And it makes that world feel that much more real too. Like you picture yourself in that situation as, random citizen on planet B, and how would you deal with this? You're not going to necessarily be some big Starfleet hero. You're going to be you, right? And I just love how it makes it personal.
And not only that, but it touches on even some of the characters or things related to the characters in this book. Mm-hmm. So it's a mix of things, but also there's the casualty report with a whole bunch of list of names of people who've been lost to the Borg. I'm trying to remember exactly where this was, Sector 22093. And I'm just looking through all these names, and towards the end, I see, like B'Elanna Torres in there, which I thought was pretty good. Her daughter's also in here. But, where did you come up with? Were you just sitting there making up names and having a good time at it?
Pretty much. I put several friends of mine are in there. And I killed all them off. And putting in B'Elanna and Morale was a very specific request made by Kirsten Beyer to set up full circle.
Yes.
10 years on, I can say that. I couldn't at the time. Mostly at the time the book came out, I was just, you'll see. Kirsten specifically asked me to put that in there.
I do remember reading that in 2009 and going, oh, and just like, I need that Voyager novel when it comes out. What's going on?
Which is exactly why we put it there. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a plan. That's
hell was. Yeah. Oh yeah. We like to troll our readers. It's tremendous fun.
So one of the main characters we have in here is Sonek Pran, who is part human, Vulcan, Betazoid, and Bajoran.
Yes.
And now he used to work under President Zeif, and then he became a university professor, and he gets recalled back in because they want him to get in talks with Empress Dinatra and of the Imperial Romulan Senate. So I'm just curious, because I found it interesting as I was reading this, and I thought, I like this character, but then I thought, why did you decide to create a whole new character and not use an existing character to carry through this book?
Sonek Pran is a type of character that I have been wanting to write for a very long time. I wanted, and the reason why I didn't want to use an existing character is because it wasn't an existing character I thought who really quite fit this mode. I wanted somebody whose superpower, for lack of a better phrase, is talking to people. About 25, 30 years ago, back when I was on the GD online service. This was back when, we had monochrome monitors and scrolling green text and 9600 baud modems were super fast. There was a thing a bunch of us did on Genie and the science fiction roundtable where we were doing sort of basically writing ourselves in an adventure story where we each had some kind of superpower and everybody else gave themselves all these cool powers. My power was the ability to talk to people. There was no violence involved. There was no of any kind. It was all just talking. It's a very Star Trek kind of power to have. And so that's what I wanted, a character where his specialty was talking to people and talking things through and getting them to think about things. And also somebody who just has a good instinct for personalities and interactions and politics and such. He actually, well, technically, yes, he did work for Zeif. He had advised several different presidents. The three presidents prior to Zeif had all used him as a consultant in various century things. The problem with Zeif was the only president who never actually listened to him. And when the Dominion War actually started, they basically kicked him out and told him to go back to Mars and teach. He was always a college professor. That was always his calling. But he had an extensive background working in politics as an advisor and as a consultant, doing exactly this sort of thing, until the Dominion War, basically. And then finally President Bacco actually, called him. They hadn't prior to this because they didn't think he'd be interested. But they bring him in, yes, to talk to Dinatra. One of my favorite things that I did was actually break up the Romulan Empire, which I thought was a natural consequence of what Shinzon did. And I was always kind of disappointed that they just wound up putting them back together again. But I thought it made for an interesting dynamic. And having Talara and Dinatra facing off against each other like that. So I thought that was a good in to bring Sonek back into the fold from a story perspective. And like I said, from a writer's perspective, there wasn't an existing character who was exactly this sort of person. I wanted somebody who was a civilian, first of all, of which there are very few in the Star Trek universe that we see on a regular basis. And I mean, there may have been a diplomatic character I could have used, but not that many really. I mean, Spock pretty much is, I could have done this with Spock, but I didn't think that would really work.
Yeah, he's overused.
There's too much baggage there.
Yeah.
And Worf is back in Starfleet at this point, so it's either that leaves me with basically Lwaxana Troi or somebody new, and or somebody. There may have been one or two one-off characters I could have used, but I wanted to create one, and also in particular, this character was based partly on the folk singer Arlo Guthrie, as well as Pete Seeger and a few other people. And his speech patterns are very much Arlo's speech patterns. Arlo Guthrie is actually a Star Trek fan, so I did this in the hopes that he would enjoy it. I have no idea if he's read it or even, I sent him an email saying, hey, I wrote this book with the guy based on you in it, and I don't know if he read it or not. But Arlo Guthrie has been a hero of mine since I was a little kid, and that's why he's got the music background. And again, like I said, his speech patterns are very much patterned on Arlo Guthrie's speech patterns.
He plays the banjo. His daughter's into music.
That's a Pete Seeger thing, is the banjo. But yes, but Pete Seeger also is one who was always big on using music and using songs to bring people together. Which is why I had the jam session on the Aventine, which is one of my favorite scenes that I've ever written. And Pete Seeger is the one who brought there's the song Estadio en Chile, which is in there about Victor Jara, which is that's a real song, real story. Victor Jara was an actual historical figure in Chile in the late 60s, early 70s. And I thought his story was particularly inspirational in light of the Borg attack. And Pete Seeger was the one who brought that particular song to the world back in '72. So that was And I just think, like I said, music has always been something that brings people together. It's hard to write about music in prose because you don't have any audio, but I tried my best.
Yeah, I tried to sing one of the songs. I just made it up.
I got to make a lot of old school fans happy because I threw in a reference to Band from Argo, which I thought was very important.
Nice.
Band from Argo being a classic old Star Trek folk song. So.
Well, and then when you're writing a character like this, I thought it was interesting that he really wasn't affected by the Borg. I mean, everybody has been affected, but he didn't really have any, he was on Earth, he was safe, or actually on Mars or whatever, but
yeah,
he didn't lose family because of the Borg. He didn't really have that kind of loss going into this. He later has some loss, but not related to the Borg. Well, somewhat related.
And even just speaking as, a fan of Star Trek and how long it's been around and that kind of thing, I think it's really cool that this is a type of character that we've never seen before as well. I think he refers to himself as a quadroon at one point.
Which was a complete misuse of that term on my part. I screwed that up.
Oh, okay.
Having said that, it's also 400 years later, so the term could have very easily evolved as these terms sometimes do, and that is now my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What does that term mean now? What it
actually means is somebody who is 1/4 of one race and 3/4 another.
Okay.
So. I screwed it up.
No, but you're right. In a few hundred years, they use it differently.
It could very easily have changed its meaning. And that, like I said, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Because the alternative is to admit in public that I screwed up, which I did, but still, my no prize is to say that. Well, in 400 years. But yeah, we haven't seen anybody who has. But there's no reason why we shouldn't at this point. I mean, if we've already broken the dam. Which was broken when Star Trek debuted, and we had Spock, who was half human and half alien. Why not? We've seen lots of people who are a melding of two species. It makes perfect sense that there would be ones who are a melding of 3 or 4. There's no reason why not. If the medical technology is there to allow for such things, it only makes sense that you'd get even more mixed species than what we've seen in your Spocks and your Balanas and so on.
So we have him on a shuttle pod or shuttlecraft, and he's going to go meet with Donatra. And after that, he decides he wants to go somewhere else. So he gives orders to the 2 officers there, and they follow it. And of course, then Captain Dax calls them out on it later.
Yeah.
It's like, why did they listen to him? I mean, they should know better to say, no, we have to follow orders. He's because that's what his talent is.
His superpower.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the whole point. And it's something that probably wouldn't have worked at a different time. One of the things is, in the aftermath of a crisis like this, people are very rarely thinking rationally. I'm thinking in particular of what life was like in the fall of 2001, particularly here in New York, after the Twin Towers were knocked over. There's a certain, and I'm particularly now looking back at the way we were all behaving in late 2001 and in 2002, a lot of decisions that were just stupid a lot of people made because it was the aftermath of trauma, and that was really my rationale there, was that any other time there is no circumstance under which the 2 officers would have listened to a civilian like that. But then again, in the other situation, Sonek wouldn't have even made the request in the first place either. It was, and I'm not sure how well that pulled off, but the idea there was that in the aftermath of a crisis, a lot of mores and rules and typical behaviors go out the window.
Yeah. And you were thinking 9/11 while you were writing this.
I'm sorry, I should have been specific. Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, that makes sense because this was, well after that, and you lived there in New York when this was taking place. So, but now it's also interesting with this character because he's got this superpower of talking to people.
I'm calling it that. It's not really a superpower.
I know. Well, anybody who's listening to this that's read the book knows that it's not a superpower, but we're calling it a superpower. But no, he has this talent. He has this talent that he can talk to people, and he's very good at diplomacy and convincing people to do things. But every superhero has their weakness, and even with his power, he does not have a good relationship with his son. He cannot seem to do with his son what he does with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, which was deliberate. I was trying to make him, I was trying to give, I didn't want him to be flawless. And that was, to some extent, that was, his basically all but commandeering a shuttle and going off on his own was also to show that he's not completely flawless, because he shouldn't have done that.
Yes, he was apologizing.
Yes.
Yeah, that aspect of him felt very real to me. Like I generally get along really well with my dad, but there comes a point where we spend a certain amount of time together, and like no matter what one of us says, the other one takes it the wrong way, and we end up getting ticked off at each other. And that, like, I felt that when he was saying, like, I can't seem to talk to him without, losing my cool or whatever, and it going south within 5 minutes. And that felt very real. I thought that was a really interesting aspect to his character.
Cool. I'm glad.
Is that because father and sons have more difficult time, you think, than fathers have with their daughters?
I don't think it's gender specific. It's some people. There are. I've seen it in several cases in my own family where a parent has 4 kids and they only really understand 3 of them. And there's one kid where the parent and the child can't get along, and it's not. It like I said, it's not gender specific really. I've seen it in many different directions, where you don't get each other. And just because you're related doesn't mean you're necessarily going to completely understand each other or be able to get along with each other. So, and Sonek and I have just, can't get on the same page there. It happens.
So now this is the cool thing also about this book, is because you said you did Articles of the Federation. You thought that would probably be it. And then Nan Bacco is used, and some of those characters are used in the Destiny trilogy. And now you got to revisit these characters once again. This was the second time for you to use these characters. Is that correct?
Well, third, really, because there was a Time for War, Time for Peace.
Oh, that's right. That's true.
When she was running for president and then got elected, and then Articles, and then this. So third time really with Bacco and with several of the characters, including Esperanza Pinheiro and a couple of others. But yeah, and there were several characters from Articles who came back as well, several counselors and staff members and such. So that was nice. And a couple characters, and there were a couple characters that were actually other characters created, like Dave Mack. A couple that he established in A Time to Kill and A Time to Heal, that I used in both, that I used in Articles, and then again in A Singular Destiny. The Tholian ambassador Tizreen was Dave's creation. A couple others.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, it was fun. I'm always happy to write Nan Bacco. I jumped at that. I had to, rein myself in and not make her the main character, because she was the supporting character. That was the important thing. I was not doing Articles 2 here. The story was bigger than that. She was supposed to be a supporting character in this. I could very easily have just, you mentioned before an existing character. The existing character could have been Nan Bacco, but she's the president. She's got 800 million other things to do. This is the sort of thing that somebody would bring to her attention, but it's not something she would discover on her own. It needed somebody who would basically be at large in a way the president can't be. So, that was part of the point, was Sonek seeing the larger pattern out there.
I think sometimes, and I just recalled this after having read this, I think as readers in Star Trek, sometimes we feel this small universe syndrome a little bit. And I love that there were a few moments in this book that remind the readers that, not every person in the Federation has intimate knowledge of all the things that somebody watching Star Trek does. When it was brought to her attention that Captain Dax had this relationship with the Klingons and with Martok, and, oh, she's a member of the House of Martok? How'd that happen? Oh, cool. Okay, we can use that. I love those little, not everybody's intimately familiar with Worf and his adventures and Dax and all these people.
Right. Well, I remember getting into an argument with 2 different people when Relics aired back in the early 90s. because these were two people, longtime Star Trek fans, who were complaining about the fact that basically the crew did not give Scotty enough reverence. They should have been respecting them. I was like, no, they shouldn't, because they're not people who watch Star Trek. They're just people in the world. This is just some old guy.
Right.
The rest of the Star Trek universe does not view the Star Trek characters as the main characters in the TV show. They view them as people on a ship doing the same job, doing a job. They're just people. The treating him with reverence is how a Star Trek fan would treat them. Treating him with annoyance at him being a pain in the ass is how LaForge should treat him. Because he was being a pain in the ass. It's a larger universe, and the nature of this of dramatic fiction is that you tend to focus on your main characters, even in an ensemble piece. But one of the joys of science fiction in particular, and fantasy also, is that you've created a world that is different from the world we live in. So it's good to look at the larger picture of how the rest of the galaxy is affected by all this stuff.
Definitely. Well, this is something that's come up earlier in our discussion, but I kind of want to delve into this head first now. And that's, of course, the formation of the Typhon Pact. And Bruce and I were actually talking on the other side of the page, and we both, when we were reading this second time, we'd both forgotten this is where the Typhon Pact gets introduced. And I think like early on, those little seeds start getting planted. And I think it was when you mentioned that the Kinshaya ships had the Breen weapons installed. I went, oh my God, I know what's going on. So this idea,
that was part of the point. That was that part of it was developed jointly by me and Marco Palmieri. That was Marco wanted in general to set up an at the very least, not an antagonist, but an adversary for the Federation. Somebody, basically a coalition that was not part of the Federation and was opposed to the Federation in many ways, but we're also doing the same sort of cooperative thing that the world of the Federation and that the Klingons do. Basically allying for a common purpose in the wake of this rather nasty tragedy that affected everybody. But they don't want to be part of the Federation because they all have an animus toward the Federation, but the idea of being cooperative is still one that is appealing. So that's what they do. And it just seemed like a nifty idea. And he and I had lunch together, and we just figured out, okay, who's going to be part of this? How are we going to do this? So on and so forth. And one of the things that was important to me was to have the two, only one of the two Romulan states be part of it, because I thought that would be much more interesting. We went back and forth as to whether we were going to include the Gorn or not, and we decided to go ahead and do it. A couple others, we debated, and then we finally, settled on the ones we settled on, which we felt that they'd be a good, it would make for a more entertaining set of bad guys. And of course, one of the things I got to do in this was basically develop the Kinshaya, who had been first mentioned in John M. Ford's The Final Reflection, and there have been references to them since then, most of them by me, but a few other people as well. But nobody had ever actually established what the Kinshaya were. Mike Ford did establish, and I think they worked with FASA to establish something for the Kinshaya for the FASA role-playing game. I decided not to do that just because it worked for the role-playing game, but I didn't think it would work as dramatically. I wanted to do something a little different, and basically made them insectoid religious fanatics because I thought that would be fun.
Yeah, and the Final Reflection is actually referred to in the book too. They mentioned the
because it was a work. It's a work of fiction in the Star Trek universe. So I figured, what the hell, throw it in there.
Oh man, sorry, this is a total tangent, but I actually highlighted the line when they're talking about all the different Klingon novels, and one of them was like a set of novels based on the Battlecruiser Vengeance series. Who the heck would read serial fiction based on an entertainment show? That's ridiculous, or something like that. That was I could not resist writing that line, and I thought for sure Marco was going to make me cut it, and he didn't. I love that was
I
there.
could not resist the shot. That was just, it was too good. And of course, there are Battlecruiser Vengeance novels. I mean, why not?
You know what I thought was really interesting? Because, yeah, I read this book back in the day when it first came out, which now that I think about it, we said it's 2009. It's 10 years. Well, now 11
now. Yeah, it was beginning of 2009. It came out either January or February 2009. So, yeah.
So it's 11 years.
Now.
Okay.
Wow.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Right. And then and then we had the Typhon Pact books and everything else we've had since. So it's interesting going back and reading this. To me, it's kind of surprising that this came up then, because after we go through this whole thing with the Borg and all this devastation, and now this is the aftermath of that, and there's all this cleanup and all this devastation that people have to put their lives back together. And you'd almost think this is a time in the Federation that things would be uplifting because the Borg are gone. Now, we're saddened that people died, but now it's time to rebuild and start a new chapter. And then this Typhon Pact just starts like being formed, and it's like another threat or potential threat to the Federation. And I can understand Nan Bacco wanting to go in a time machine and stop herself from being president and dealing with, because it's one thing after another. And it's like, whoa, this is kind of heavy,
Yeah. I mean, it's part of the nature of dramatic fiction. You've got to come up with things for the people to deal with. Extended periods of peace don't always make for good fiction. But and like I said, it just felt like a natural outgrowth. Both Marco and I were really tickled by the idea of basically a bunch of different species and nations doing what the Federation does, but without the Federation being part of it. That level of cooperation. One of the reasons why the Federation is as strong as it is that it's got equal contributions from everybody. You got 150 different worlds working together, and that can be very powerful in the best possible way, because it's cooperative. And the idea of having the Romulans, the Gorn, the Tholians, and so on, all getting together and doing their own version of it, sort of the Funhouse Mirror version of the Federation. We thought would be fun to play with. And then, of course, Marco got laid off, and they didn't hire me to write any Typhon books, so we got to create it and then do absolutely nothing with it, either of us. But such is life. But it was the fodder for lots and lots of really cool stories by a bunch of different people in the next few years. So it worked out.
Which actually brings me to the kind of last point I wanted to talk about here, which is kind of the legacy of what you guys created here. And, like we've said, it's been over 10 years since the novel's been published. And I feel like this really left its mark on the world of Treklit. And I was kind of wondering if you might speak to what you feel the legacy of this novel's been, and how it's impacted the Star Trek stories told that came after it.
Well, I think it's continuing the work that I did in the articles as well, which is to just show one of the things that always frustrated me. And one of the reasons why I wrote articles in the first place was we never really got to see the Federation government. It's always Starfleet doing all the work on behalf of the Federation, rather than, Starfleet being a part of, an arm of the Federation. It was always seemed to be acting almost unilaterally, which I didn't think was really fair, especially because we got so much detailed looks at the Klingon government, at the Romulan government, at the Cardassian government, the Bajoran government. But we never really got much of a look at the Federation government that theoretically should be, in charge of Starfleet, really. We didn't get past the Admiralty. And for the most part, you don't need to, It really only bugged me in things like the Dominion War, and a couple of other situations where there should have been more of a political component to it, just because of the nature of what was going on. So I think having that both, in the Articles of the Federation, the aspect of it that Dave brought into Destiny as well, that was a major part of it. And what I did in a Singular Destiny was to just bring the Federation civilian government more into a certain sense of prominence in what's going on in the galaxy, because it would, the nature of a Star Trek story is that the Starfleet characters are going to be the focus, which makes sense. But one of the advantages of a series of novels is that you're not limited by doing a 44-minute episode or a 42-minute episode or whatever. You've got more storytelling space, so you can show the wider impact and the wider support that Starfleet would have. And I think, A Singular Destiny was part of the opening up of the Federation government to that, which got then used quite a bit in the Typhon Pact stories and beyond, and in the Fall mini series and so on. So I think that was the main thing it did was give us a more making the entirety of the Federation more a part of what Starfleet's doing than it was before, which I think is good. I think it works better, and it also just helped. Yeah, I mean, one of the advantages at the time we were doing this, basically until they announced the Picard series, the 24th century was completely free. It was, all the new Star Trek between 2001 and now has been either in the 22nd or the 23rd century. The 24th century had been completely abandoned by the screen iterations of Star Trek. So we were really, and the direction, and a lot of the direction that the fiction took. I mean, honestly, it was. I give most of the credit to the A Time 2 miniseries for sort of setting everything up for both Nemesis and then what happened after Nemesis, because that was the completely open field after that, because that was the farthest forward the timeline had gone. So I think the impact it had was just continuing the work that we'd already started in A Time 2, and that the Destiny trilogy took it even further, and just continuing the aftermath of that. And everything that has been done since is sort of built off of what Dave did in the Destiny trilogy, first cleaning up after Destiny, and then dealing with the Typhon Pact, and then the Fall, and then cold equations and so on. And all the different stuff that's been going on with the Section 31 stuff that Dave and Dayton have been doing, and so on. It's all continued very nicely, and what Una and David George have done with the Deep Space Nine stories moving forward. So it helped shape the fiction, or continue the direction the fiction had already been going in, which has been great. It's pretty much going to have to come to an end now, because the Picard show is going to, kick it all to the curb. But that's fine. This is what happens with tie-in fiction. Every new iteration of Star Trek will come along and mess up what we did before.
Well, don't you feel like you want to call Kirsten Beyer and say, "Hey, come on, you were part of this with us. Why didn't you try to save this continuity?"
That's not how the business works, and Kirsten knows that as well, better than anybody. You're not going to tell Patrick Stewart that he can't do something he wants to do because of something somebody wrote in a book that only less than 1% of the audience read. And that's the thing. Tie-in fiction reaches, less than 10% at the very least. The best-selling tie-in novel reaches less than 10% of the worst-rated episode of a TV show. It's just, there's no comparison. There's too much money in Hollywood flying around for anybody there to give a rat's patoot about what we're doing in a bunch of novels. It's just not, it's the tail wagging the dog. And it's fine. I don't, yes, we know going in that the novels are not the main part of the story, and are telling supplemental stories that may get overwritten later. It's the nature of the beast. I don't stress about what's real in a fictional construct. How many different versions of Sherlock Holmes have we gotten over the last 15 years? All of which are incompatible with each other, and all of which are completely incompatible with what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote, and yet they're all popular. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is tie-in fiction. That's not the original source material. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is basically derivative fiction based on the comic books. People still go see those movies.
Even The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland's tie-in fiction to the original story.
Yeah, it's an adaptation. These stories get modified with time, and again, it's fiction. I'm not worried about it. I didn't worry about it when First Contact overwrote Federation. Federation is still a great novel. First Contact is still a great movie. They're not compatible with each other, but who cares? They're both tell good stories that still work in the universe, in the Star Trek universe.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm thrilled at the fact that the fiction has basically since 2001 pretty much been able to do what it wants with the 24th century. Especially since 2004, once it was clear Nemesis was it, at least until now. But having said that, I as far as I know, and again, I'm not directly involved anymore, but as far as I know, there is a plan to basically bring the 24th century continuity to a satisfying close. The idea is to not just pull a Disney and just go, sorry, these are gone now, and but to actually like tie everything off and then move forward, with stuff that's based on what's been on screen. So there is, I'm told, and again, this is not inside knowledge of any sort. This is just what I've heard, because again, Dave is one of my best friends, and Dave Ward is a close friend of mine, and lots of other people who are friends of mine. So I know the plans are afoot, but I know nothing's completely solid yet either. But there is a plan to actually, make this all work, one way or another, because I think it's a better approach. I think I kind of wish Disney had done the same thing, although I understand why they didn't either. It's to not just, consign it all to the cornfield, as it were, but to at least give something to the people who have invested in it for the last 20 years. Give them some, closure on that particular storyline before we. And in the meantime, there's going to be stuff that ties into the Picard series as well. Una McCormack's got a prequel novel that, if it's not out yet, it will be soon. And they're going to be doing more fiction based on that as well. So.
Yep. Yeah. It's, it was such a small audience reading the books. It's almost like you could continue that continuity because you have a loyal audience, but then you have a new audience looking to come in, so you don't want to confuse them. And
exactly. Yeah. The screen versions of Trek are what lead the way. That's what the fiction is based on. And to do otherwise is to basically ignore it. And especially if the Picard show proves incredibly popular, that would be even harder to do.
Yeah.
So. Mm-hmm.
So I do have a quick question, though, going back to A Singular Destiny, the cover. We don't always talk about the covers on here, but this was done by Alan Digman.
Yeah.
And it's like puzzle pieces. There's like a city in the background, cityscape, and then there's these puzzle pieces with like a nebula. Like, what's the inspiration? Like, do you know how?
I have absolutely no idea. I had nothing to do with that cover.
So you never talked to the cover artists, or?
I do sometimes. Sometimes, and because I have a background in cover design, because when I was working for Byron Price in the 90s, I was very much involved in the cover designs of the books I edited. I edited a whole bunch of things, and I did a lot of design work, and not direct design work, but art direction. And working with art directors and working with artists and working on that stuff. So I have some experience in this. How much, but also, honestly, one of the reasons Marco and Alan and the art department at Pocket worked out that cover. But part of the problem is I had no frapping clue what to do with that cover for that book. Because it's such an atypical book. Mm-hmm. I didn't know, and I was grateful when I saw the cover, because I'm glad somebody freaking thought of something, because I didn't have any clue. I think it works because the idea of, in particular, the puzzle pieces, I think is a good metaphor for what is happening in the book. It's basically putting together what's happening in the galaxy from all these little clues going around. So I think that was a nice metaphor for what the book is doing. But I in this particular case, I unfortunately didn't have anything. Wish I had.
Well, you did a great job at not influencing the cover. So there you go.
There you go.
Oh, the other thing I was just thinking, because you were talking earlier about, having lunch and talking about the book and all that stuff. Every time we have authors on, it usually comes up of them having lunch with an editor. And I'm just thinking, is there a particular spot in New York where this is going on? Because I want to sit in and listen in.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it only happens if the editor, if you happen to be, I'm in New York and so are Pocket's offices. So that made it easier.
So then saying that, I would ask then if you have anything new, Star Trek or non-Star Trek related, that you've had lunch with editors or not had lunch with editors that you have coming out soon.
Nothing I can really talk about quite yet. Well, that's not true. I've got, I'm working on a bunch of different things right now, one of which is the next Precinct book for my original novel series. The Precinct book, the next one is called Phoenix Precinct. I'm also working on the next book in my urban fantasy series, which does not have a title yet. The series does. The series is The Adventures of Brom Gold. And the next book have the plot for it. I just got to sit down and write it. That's the same thing with Phoenix Precinct. I'm hoping to have those out in either 2020 or 2021, depending on how quickly I can write them. Currently, I am working on a collaborative science fiction novel. It's an author named David Sherman, who's written a great deal of military science fiction. David wrote 2 books in a military science fiction series called The 18th Race. First 2 books are Issue in Doubt and In All Directions. The third book is going to be called To Hell and Regroup. And David, unfortunately, has been unable to finish the book on his own. David was a Marine in Vietnam. And as he's gotten older, it's gotten harder and harder for him to actually write military action. It's kind of triggering his PTSD a little bit from those experiences. So I edited the first 2 books for, at the time, Dark West Books. It's now being published by Eastbeck Books. And so David asked me to basically take what he'd written of book 3, which is some chapters and an outline for the rest of the book, and to finish the book for him. So that's going to be a collaboration between me and him. So I'm working on that right now. We're hoping to have that out in the spring of 2020, called To Hell and Regroup. And I'm working on another project that's just still too early to talk about, and another tie-in project that I can't really talk about yet, which is a tie-in to a game. And the next next Precinct book, and I've got another Precinct book after that under contract. I've got another Brom Gold book after that under contract. So that's going to be keeping me busy for a while. I'd like to do another Alien book. I'd like to do a sequel to Alien Isolation, which came out this year, but I don't know what's happening there one way or the other. I'm hoping that Alien Isolation did well enough that they'll want another book featuring Amanda Ripley. But I don't know. On top of everything else, Disney just bought Fox right before the book came out. So who the hell knows? And it could have no effect at all on the Alien novels. It could have a tremendous effect. It could have a medium effect. We don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm supposed to have, I got to actually write it, a short story in Michael Jan Friedman's Shared World anthology called Pangea. He's doing the third anthology in that series from Crazy 8 Press. I've got a story. I'm going to have a story in that that's hopefully going to be out in time in around the summer of 2020. Meanwhile, I am still going to be reviewing the new episodes of the various new Star Trek series for Tor.com. I'll be reviewing each episode of Picard as it comes out. I'll be reviewing the last of the short treks when it hits, and when Discovery Season 3 starts, I'll be reviewing that for them as well. I am almost finished. On Tor.com, I've been doing my great superhero movie rewatch, which has been every live-action movie based on a superhero comic book. I'm almost caught up to Real Fine now. So the January 6th is going to be not January 6th, January 4th, excuse me, is going to be, or January 3rd. I can't do dates. Brain is not working. January 3rd is going to be Men in Black International. January 10th will be Dark Phoenix. And then January 17th will be Joker. And that's it. There are no more superhero movies anymore because I'll have done all of them at that point. I'm probably going to continue that as an annual feature where at the end of the year, I will look back on that year's superhero movies. I mean, 2020 alone is going to have, Black Widow and Wonder Woman 84 and another Kingsman movie, a bunch of others. So the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie. So there's a bunch of things that are coming out, but I'll look at them when at the end of the year. Meantime, I have a new thing I'm going to be doing for Tor.com, but I'm not going to be announcing it formally until after this podcast goes live, so I can't tell you what it is yet. I can tell you to keep an eye on, I believe, right around when the Joker rewatch hits, I will be announcing what the new thing I'll be doing for Tor.com is. New weekly
exciting.
Or regular thing for them. But so I'm still going to be writing for them, and I'm still going to be doing other stuff as well. I've been doing a lot of writing for Tor, and I'm going to continue doing that. I'm still writing stuff for my Patreon as well. I do regular TV and movie reviews there. I do little excerpts from my works in progress, and I also have been writing vignettes featuring my original characters. That's the other thing I'm working on. I totally forgot about that. I am working on 4 new novellas in the Super City Cops series, which is about cops in a city filled with superheroes. I've done one novel and 3 novellas in that series already, and a couple short stories. And Falstaff Books is going to be publishing 4 new novellas in that setting as well. So I've got that coming. So I'm keeping busy.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're really busy.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. And I'm hoping I don't currently have any new Star Trek fiction in the works, but I have been talking with IDW. Right now it's just talking. It may come to nothing, but there are some ideas floating around that may or may not become Star Trek comics in the future. We'll see.
Ooh, excellent. Keeping my fingers crossed on that front. That's cool.
Yes.
Me too. There's one thing in particular that I have pitched at them that at least is possible, and I really, really want to do it. We'll see what happens. So.
Oh, that's great.
All right.
I hear the enthusiasm, so, I love that. I'm excited.
Yeah. Now, if anybody wants to follow you online, where would they go?
Best bet is to go to DeCandido.net, which is a very primitive-looking link dump. It looks like it was designed by somebody who learned HTML in 1996. That's because I learned HTML in 1996. But it serves its purpose, which is to find, basically, it's a guide to all the methods of cyberstalking me. It has links to my ordering links for my most recent fiction. There's an email link there, and there's links to all my social media, blog, Facebook page, Twitter feed, Instagram account, Wikipedia, to my stuff on Tor.com, and all that good stuff. So, one more thing I didn't mention that I'm working on because you can still support it. I did a crowdfund for 2 new short stories in both The Precinct and my Key West urban fantasy stories featuring a woman named Cassie Zukov. There's 2 stories. It's been funded, but Indiegogo, I did it through Indiegogo. And if you make your funding with Indiegogo, you can still continue to support it after the funding period ends. So if you want to get the story, you can still go to Indiegogo. There's a link to it on DeCandido.net. And for 2 stories, one is called The Gorvangan Rampages, which is a story that takes place between Griffin Precinct and Mermaid Precinct. And a Cassie Zukov story called Ragnarok in a Hard Place, which is a story involving Norse gods creating trouble. So,
Nice.
and if you want to support, those are only, initially at least, will only be available to the crowdfund supporters, but you can still go and support it, even though the funding, and I'll be doing that in the early part of this year. So.
Wow.
Excellent.
You really are doing like you really just need to go outside and like see the sun at some point.
I do see the sun. I go out. I also teach karate to kids 3 days a week, and I take classes at the dojo. So at the very least, I go out and do that.
Oh, that's cool.
And my wife and I went to see. We're members of all the zoos in New York, the Bronx Zoo, and there's the Central Park Zoo, the Prospect Park Zoo, and the Queens Zoo, and the New York Aquarium. They're all under the same. They're all run by the same people, by the Wildlife Conservation Society, and we're members of that. We're members of a bunch of different museums and botanical gardens here in New York. So, and we try to make sure we make time every once in a while to just go out and do something, either at one of those places or elsewhere, just to get us out of the house. Because my wife is freelance also, so we both work from home, and it's good to just get our butts out there periodically.
Absolutely. You got to get some exercise and do something different,
Well, yeah. Well, like I said, I go to the dojo a lot, so the exercise happens.
Too, yeah.
Not to mention wrangling small children. But
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And, we're going to have you back when we read one of your other novels sometime.
I'd be okay with that.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. I love that Keith mentioned that he learned HTML in 1996 because I think I did too. And like when I look at websites nowadays and I'm trying to think, every once in a while, the thought just pops into my head. Oh, I could add frames to this. Do you remember frames? Weren't frames amazing? Wow, that is so 90s. Not good.
Wow. No, I didn't really get into it like you guys did, but man, I remember it was late 95 when I first signed on to the internet, and I'll never forget that. No, I'm sorry. I take that back. It was late 94 when I signed to the internet. Yeah. But wow, what a great thing that was. Well, it's been fun talking about being online today, but this isn't the only thing we've been discussing here on the network. So here's a quick look at some of the other things you might find somewhere else here on the network called Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, continuing mission.
Why they killed that officer, what they have to do with Project Perseus.
Can I just throw my 2 cents worth in and say, I know who they are. They're Smurfs.
Oh, if only.
From the planet Smurfia. Tell me I'm right.
If you insist. Sure. You're right. You're not. But I'll tell you.
Oh, no. I've ruined it. I've ruined it for everybody.
So, that's the first mystery, and then a series of other mysteries happen as it becomes clear that on at least one other of the Visionary class ships that they're now well on their way outside Federation space, that there was a saboteur.
Earl Grey.
But the first day of shooting, I shook his hand and I said, Mr. Nimoy, you seem to think I know what I'm doing here, but I really don't. And he had said to me in the audition for the Vulcan mystique, think 1,000 years of wisdom behind the eyes. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's a tall order.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to put in the eyes.
Literary Treks.
We're not messing around anymore. The reset button is gone. Characters' lives are going to move forward. Fortunes are going to change. When things happen, you can take it seriously. It's not all just going to get forgotten by the time the next book comes out next month. This is going to be something that is going to carry forward and is going to have lasting repercussions on all of the literary books, not just the ones written by Mac, not just the ones in this particular subseries, but by joining them all together and having nods to the Star Trek Corps of Engineers, to Voyager, to DS9, to Enterprise.
Standard Orbit.
We've had some various folks in guest star roles and things that had passed here and there, the last year or so, and all of that is sad. But when somebody who was really a part of the foundation of what Star Trek is and what it became, it really hits you kind of hard.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond, and you'll find us wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit that subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they're published. And if you have the time, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a star rating and a written review. We would love to hear your thoughts on the show. If you're not an Apple user, though, we've got you covered as well. You can find all of our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, YouTube, most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website, or grab the RSS link there as well.
If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com patreon.com/trekfm. That's patreon.com/trekfm to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more, available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month, and we really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/trekfm.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. Of course, at the top of the show, you heard us responding to listener feedback from the Babel Conference, and that really is the best way to make your thoughts known. That's our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's Babel, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email here on the show, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select Literary Treks, and that'll come right to me and Bruce. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM.
Find us on our Goodreads group, where we have a bookshelves with all our previously covered books as well as the currently reading section, so you know what is coming up for future shows. Plus, great conversations happening about the books and comics. Just search for Literary Treks on Goodreads and click Join Group. We'd like to thank Norman C. Lau, Ken Tripp, Greg Rosier, Brandon Shane Mutala, Justin Ozer, Jeffrey Harlan, and Casey Pettit for their support of the Trek FM network and being associate producers for Literary Treks as well. So Dan, when you're not trying to put the universe back together after a Borg attack, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me trying to put those pieces together and tweeting about it on Twitter. I'm at Kertrats, that's Kertrats. You can also find me on youtube.com/Kertrats Productions, where I have a channel dedicated mostly to Star Trek, but I talk about other science fiction and other things as well. And you can find me on facebook.com/Kertrats Productions and on treklit.com, which is my website where I review Star Trek novels, both old and new. Now, Bruce, when you're not traveling around with the Traveling Medicine Show entertaining people all across the Federation, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me on the Babel Conference. I'm in there all the time. And you can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. And you can find me on the Star Wars Report talking about Star Wars. And that's about it. Thank you very much. Anyway, yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening. Oh, yeah, well, that's our last line. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and until next time,
live long
and read on.
You call that light reading? To each his own, number one.
You know, you guys didn't even ask about like the SCE and Gorkon parts of the story.
You know what? I was going to ask about the SC, and then I forgot.
Because the main character on the Musgrave that I did, Hadjik, that is totally Zelenka from Stargate Atlantis.
Oh, I can see it. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to put Zelenka in the Star Trek universe, and that's who Bojan Hadjik is. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.